Hello, everybody. Hello. How's my sound? And I asked that because I have an air conditioning on. So I'm not sure if that's how well that will work. Also, let's see, is everyone in here? Let me just make sure that my, this show is very informal sometimes. When I say sometimes, I mean like most of the time. So I just want to make sure everyone's here. I'm also just copying the number of one of my guests, which I will not share with you guys. Sorry. Not that many people posted things that they wanted me to cover. So I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do about that. Okay, let me just see. Let's go here. All right, we got some people here. Okay, comments. Great. I am on now. Thank you. Okay, great. You hear me? And how is the sound, though? Where's our queen? Oh my God, there's an evil queen. Katie Halper's evil twin. I like that. Implies that I'm not evil. Okay, so I have some special announcements. First of all, I'm going to do that thing I always do, which is where I go on Instagram and go on Twitter and Instagram and give a little shout out and a plug for this, because we're starting to do this regularly, but I haven't consistently done this regularly, which I realize now that I'm saying it kind of doesn't make any sense. Also recording a backup, hoping that sounds good. Okay, great. Okay, so any headlines that you guys wanted me to talk about? I figured that we can do something kind of like Democracy Later, because I realize, Democracy Now! Doesn't have a show on weekends. So that could be one of the ways that we contribute at the Katie Halper show. I forgot to put on highlighter. Damn. There goes my whole show. Okay. No, any ideas? All right, we'll go through regular headlines then. Also, if anyone wants to cancel anybody, you can put your suggestions in there. And the way what's happening, by the way, is that Wednesdays my co-host is Nando, so I'm doing this show twice a week. Wednesday nights will be with Nando Villa, and Sunday nights we'll have a guest co-host, but not tonight. Tonight I'm going rogue. But yeah. So we're going to have a couple segments. So one is, again, Democracy Later, which is where we kind of try to pick up where Democracy Now! Left off and share some stories that we want to make sure the media covers, but that they won't be covering. Another one is Cancellation, cancel culture, where we say who we want to be cultured, who we want to be canceled. And then we should have another one, Cancellation culture, and then culture, where we, I guess, call out someone who's not cultured. I'm not sure how to do it, but we definitely need to have some people on who are not cultured. I'm not sure what that'll mean. But speaking of cultured, you know who I'm going to have on tonight as after Chesa? Not until around 10:30. But guess who I'm having on tonight? He's a repeat offender, no pun intended. He makes drinks. Guys, by the way, put links in. This is a very erudite live stream. So make sure you put links in so we can actually, sink our teeth into the issue. Does that sound good? Cancel Colorado police. I actually really want to cancel. I'm going to open up Democracy Now! Because we really should do. I really want to cancel Johnson & Johnson. Did you hear about this? These absolutely terrible people. Wait, okay, hold on. Where is it? Amy Goodman. How do you spell Johnson & Johnson? Okay, yeah. This is great. This is absolutely disgusting. So here, the first company that I'm canceling on tonight's episode is Johnson & Johnson. Now let me do one of these screen shares. No, it's not Max Blumenthal. It's Asad Haider. Okay. All right, so here's cancellation number 1. Ready? In racial justice victory, Johnson & Johnson to pay $2 billion to women in asbestos-laced baby powder suit. Johnson & Johnson, can you guys see this okay? Yeah. Johnson & Johnson has been ordered to pay $2.1 billion to a group of women who developed ovarian cancer after using talcum powder contaminated with asbestos. Johnson & Johnson heavily marketed the powder to African-American women despite warnings that the product could cause cancer. 6 of the plaintiffs in the Johnson & Johnson case died before the trial started. 5 more of the women have died since 2018. The company still has not banned the products globally. That's amazing. They still face thousands of lawsuits. I'm going to continue. I'm quoting from Amy Goodman. It's really disgusting. They engaged in conduct that was outrageous because of evil motive and reckless indifference. The appeals court reduced the original verdict amount from 2018, which had been $4.7 billion, but Johnson & Johnson still faces thousands more lawsuits. It recently stopped selling its brand of talcum powder in the United States and Canada, but continues to sell the products overseas. The lawyer for the plaintiffs told consumers they should throw away any baby powder in their homes. Okay, I don't understand how they are still selling this product overseas. That just seems so incredibly awful and disgusting, and I don't know how they can get away with it. And yeah, I think we should maybe we should do a I assume there's a petition, not sure, but it's pretty gross. So that's my suggestion for cancellation of the week. Okay, give me 2 more minutes because I'm just going to do a little shout out. Keep putting links in, guys. I'm just going to do a little shout out. Okay. Alrighty, let me just do a little Twitter thing. Give me like 5 minutes. Link to, okay, you put a link in there, great. Okay, hi guys, it's Katie Halper. Obviously you know that, and wanted to invite you all to another live stream that I'm doing tonight, and this time I'm doing it with Chesa Boudin, the decarceral DA of San Francisco. He's actually an elected official. It's pretty cool. Probably because he got that Katie Halper show bump. Unclear. Could have been decisive, though. So we're going to have him on at around 9:35, 9:40. And also, I'm going to also be having on Asad Haider, who will give us a little chat about, I don't know, Marxism, I believe, because it's any day of the week. And yeah, I'm doing a new thing, by the way, which is where I ask people for suggestions for basically democracy later. So the stories from this weekend that should be covered by the media, that probably won't be, but that we'd like to see covered. Okay, so you can catch me. It's my pin. Is it my pin tweet? You know what? Let me pin it right now. Let me do that right now. This is all very, you know, not very informal, slightly informal, right? Wouldn't you say? Let's see. By the way, Chesa has a new podcast called Chasing Justice. Oh, that's funny. I never realized Chasing Justice. Wow. Not sure if he thought about that, but I'm definitely going to have to tell him about that. Real PR potential. Yeah, it's pinned to my it's my pinned status, my pinned tweet. And hold on 1 second. And yeah, that's about it. Okay. And someone who's okay. Bye. Okay. See you guys soon. Okay, guys, sorry. I'm giving you any more links anyone wants to put up? All right. Give me one more second. Just going to do this on Instagram. Okay. Let's see. Instagram live. I'm not very good at Instagram, but one second. I just want to make sure, because this is a very exciting episode. So I want to make sure people see it. Okay, I think I'm now live. All right, awesome. So hi everyone, Katie Halper here. I'm doing a live, links to what? Links to stories that you guys want me to cover and others to cover. Remember, there's no Democracy Now! On the weekends, so we got to try to round up the good headlines. So Amy Goodman, will come over and watch and know what to cover. And yeah, when I say links, please, hit the like button. Thank you, Brian Frederick. And guys, anyone wants to super chat, you know what that is. Donate, and it's great. And it's kind of a little problematic, maybe ethically, but we'll see. Okay, so come over, guys, to YouTube, where I'm going to be interviewing none other than Chesa Boudin, who is the DA of San Francisco, a decarceral DA. Then, as if that's not already enough, we're going to talk to Asad Haider. Don't be a hater. Come and watch Asad. That's going to be later in like an hour. We got Asad Haider later. So, yeah. Also, make sure you go to, if you go to my YouTube or my Twitter, I sound like Bernie Sanders. If you go to the YouTubes right now, you can see me. If you go there, you can put links to stories that you want to be covered. Yeah, right now. Go to YouTube. The link is on my Twitter. Okay. I don't know how to post it here. I'm very bad at this stuff. And you can ask questions of me. And then, yeah, and again, two excellent guests, Asad Haider and Chesa Boudin. Okay. All right. I don't know how any of this works. Okay. So, guys. All right. Without any further ado, I'm going to. This is funny. This is not very appropriate. I guess this is inappropriate. I shouldn't share that. But I'm going to, where are the links? Put them again, if you don't mind, because I don't have a moderator yet. We're going to get that, but just post the links again. Garden Gnome, please. All right. Okay, so I'm going to invite the guest in. Chase, are you ready? Chase, yeah, you're there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great, awesome. So, Chesa, do you have headphones, by the way? I should have asked you that before.
I do. Would you like me to use them?
Yes, thank you.
Give me a second.
Look at this jurist. We have a jurist in our presence. I really like using that word.
But we also have a journalist in our presence. So
oh, yeah, it's true. J&J. Not to be confused with the evil Johnson & Johnson. Okay.
All right, I can hear you.
Oh, great. It's so much better. Okay. Whoops.
Amazing what technology does for us.
I know. Okay, I'm trying to click on this link, but we'll get to that later because I'm gonna. Right now we have a DA in the house. Okay, so Chesa, thank you so much again for coming. Tell us first of all, you have some exciting news. You have a new podcast, but let's first kind of provide a context for what you're doing, who you are. You are again the DA in San Francisco. And you are decarceral, and you're part of this wave of progressive decarceral DAs who probably a couple years ago never thought that they'd go step anywhere near a prosecutor's office. So tell us what has most surprised you about what you've been able to do in this role.
Well, you're right, Katie. I was a public defender a couple of years ago, and I was really happy being a public defender. As you know, I grew up visiting my own parents in prison, and the work of being a public defender was work I really enjoyed. Being a trial lawyer, advocating on behalf of individuals who were usually in their worst moment in life, in a crisis, and trying to help them navigate that and find a way to to a future, to a healthier, safer future, was work that I loved. And now I'm San Francisco's district attorney. It's a real honor. It's humbling to serve the entire city and county of San Francisco. And it's a big job because we're really trying to put the justice back in the criminal justice system. We're trying to make sure that instead of using crime victims as pieces of evidence to secure convictions and send people to prison for lengthy terms, we're actually investing in preventing crime, in healing communities that have been harmed by crime, and in recognizing the full humanity, even of those that we prosecute, so that they can successfully re-enter their communities and their families once they've been held accountable. What surprised me the most, I think, I knew that I was in for a big challenge. I knew that the system wouldn't become a truly just system overnight, no matter who was running a particular office. But I nevertheless have been really surprised at how slow it is to implement change. And we've done a lot, and there's so much more that we need to do.
So what are some of the things that you've done?
Well, I was really excited that one of the first things I did, because of my own life experience, was to implement a diversion program for primary caregiver parents. The basic idea, Katie, is we want parents to be at home with their kids, not in jail cells. We are all safer when parents are taking care of their kids, and we're all better off financially when we're investing in families and communities rather than having tax dollars go to county jails and foster parents. So that was the first thing we did. The next thing we did back in January was to prohibit my assistant district attorneys from ever seeking cash bail. We ended cash bail as far as our office is concerned.
Wow. So
Yeah.
Those are two things that really actually make a concrete difference, right?
Huge, right? Huge, because you think about how many parents get arrested and how many, then you create this intergenerational cycle of incarceration. So many of the kids that I grew up visiting in the criminal justice system, visiting, our parents together in prison, are now incarcerated themselves. And if we could have found a better way to intervene when their parents got arrested, a better way to give their parents the skills and the support and the incentives to really be good parents, we might have broken that cycle. We might have prevented a crime from being committed. And with regard to bail, look, it's, I'm sure many people watching are familiar with how evil and discriminatory it is. But let's just be really clear. Money bail is a system that allows wealthy people to buy their freedom no matter how dangerous they are, while poor people, no matter how low risk, no matter how wrongly accused, languish behind bars, and usually forces people to waive their rights and plead guilty, even if they're innocent. Now we have a system in San Francisco, I'm proud to say, that doesn't rely on wealth to determine who's incarcerated, but rather risk. And I'm hoping the rest of the state and country will follow our lead. But that's just what we did in January, Katie. We've been busy since then, too. In response to COVID, we cut the county jail population by nearly 50% so that our jail medical director could create social distancing and quarantine people who test positive coming into the jail. And we did it all in a context where crime is actually falling. So it's pretty amazing to see, people who say, oh, well, if you let these folks out of jail, crime is going to go up. And in fact, what we saw is the opposite, that when we work with San Francisco's Pretrial Diversion project, when we work with our other reentry partners like the Young Women's Freedom Center, we're actually able to find people who shouldn't have been in jail in the first place. We found a woman with a high-risk pregnancy, no criminal history, serving time on a misdemeanor. It's unacceptable. There's no reason in our society where we would possibly say that's in the interest of public safety to put her unborn child in a context where COVID is spreading through jails and prisons across the country. Why would we put someone like that with a high-risk pregnancy behind bars for a misdemeanor? So we're doing better around incarceration rates. And in the wake of George Floyd's murder, we've also taken a number of steps to increase transparency, accountability, and racial justice within our office and with regard to the police department that we work with in San Francisco.
Is there, I hear a little, it's not a huge deal, but some clicking. You're not, maybe, what is that? Maybe it's me.
It might be my chair. It might be my chair.
It's fine. It's very light. It's very light. Can you define cash bail just so everyone is on the same page? And also define explain what you mean by pretrial diversion.
For sure. For sure. Thank you, Katie. So cash bail is a system that's really unique to the United States and the Philippines. Those are the two countries in the world that have a for-profit cash bail system. And basically the way it works in California, for example, it's pretty similar in most places, is let's say you get arrested for burglary. The police take you to jail and they tell the sheriff who runs the county jail, this person was arrested for burglary. And each county has a list, it's called a schedule, a bail schedule, but it's basically a list of charges on the one side and price tags on the other. So burglary in San Francisco might be $25,000 or it might be $50,000, right? Depending on the county you're in. And if you can pay that $25,000 or $50,000, then you get out of jail immediately. No questions asked. You may have to come back to court to face charges, but you don't need to wait in jail to be brought to court. If you don't have the full amount of money, you can go to a for-profit bail bond company and you can pay them 10% or somewhere around 10%, and they'll keep that money. You'll never get it back, but you'll get out of jail. Now, if you don't have even that 10% or a house or a car that you can give them the title to, then you're stuck in jail until you go to trial or until the judge orders you released. So it's a process that really pins pretrial incarceration of people who are presumed innocent under the Constitution to their wealth rather than to anything correlated to public safety or strength of evidence or prior criminal record or anything else that good public policy would require us to consider. It allows wealthy people to basically never spend a day in jail. And poor people, even if they're never convicted of a crime, often fill our jails. So when I took office in San Francisco, about 80 to 85% of the people in our jail were awaiting trial. They had not yet been convicted. That's a problem we see all across the country. That enough of an explanation?
Yeah, great. Yeah. How long have we had it and how long has the Philippines had it? Do you know?
So money bail goes back centuries, actually. What's unique about the United States and the Philippines is that we allow for-profit, basically insurance companies, to offer that sort of 10% payment plan, and then they make a profit off of it. It's a very, very profitable industry, and it's one that transfers wealth from poor Black communities to international insurance companies. In San Francisco, we see that the folks who end up paying these non-refundable premiums almost all come from just a few zip codes. It's mostly Black women. It's mothers, it's girlfriends, it's sisters of young men who get arrested. And again, it's something that actually undermines public safety because it allows people who are really dangerous, your Hollywood sex predator types, for example, to buy their way out of jail without regard to what they're going to do while they're out. And we've seen that in a number of high-profile cases recently, while people arrested for shoplifting may languish behind bars, lose their job, lose their housing, lose custody of their kids, all before they've even been charged with a crime.
And pretrial diversion, that's the term, right?
Yeah, pretrial diversion. So the way that works is basically when there's a number of different systems, but when someone's arrested and accused of a low-level crime, a lot of jurisdictions now, instead of formally charging them or formally trying to seek a conviction, allow them to earn a dismissal of the case. And what that looks like depends on the jurisdiction. In San Francisco, for example, if you're arrested and charged with, let's say, getting into a fight with someone in a bar, and it's low level, you don't have a criminal record, nobody's injured, instead of trying to secure a conviction against you at all costs, we would give you the option of working with our pretrial diversion project, which is a nonprofit that would have you do anger management classes or community service over a period of time. And if you engage with their programming successfully, then the court would dismiss the charges against you. And in fact, we would expunge the arrest from your record, so there'd be no record that you were even arrested. It's a way to incentivize people who are really low level to engage with the kind of programming and services that give back to the community and address the root causes of what led to their arrest without racking up more criminal convictions and jail time.
And can you share a little bit about, you refer to your going to, people you met growing up visiting your parents in jail. Can you explain to people who may not know your story, what your story is? And also, I'm wondering if the way that, if your upbringing has affected the way you, what you do as a DA in ways maybe that you didn't predict. Like, do you think that, are there ways that it's coming up that you're realizing, having never been, a DA before, that it shaped you?
Definitely. So yeah, a little bit of background on my family and my upbringing. I was born in New York City in 1980. And when I was about a year old, my biological parents left me at the babysitter and drove off for the day to participate in an armed robbery that had been organized by the Black Liberation Army. Their role was basically to be unarmed getaway car drivers. But the robbery went really badly wrong. And one of the security guards in this armored car was shot and killed. Another one was shot and injured. And then when my parents' car was pulled over, after they had surrendered and were unarmed, the people in the back of the van they were driving came out shooting. 2 police officers were killed. And my parents both ended up getting arrested that day. They were tried separately. My father ended up with a 75-year minimum sentence. So he is still incarcerated to this day. My father's David Gilbert. I see one of the questions in the live comments. Yes, the answer is yes. He's done. David Gilbert, my father, has now done nearly 40 years in prison. He is still incarcerated, and he's not currently eligible for parole until the year 2056. My mother, who did exactly the same thing as my father, just to give one of so many examples of the arbitrariness of our criminal justice system, my mother ended up with a 20-year to life sentence, and she served 22 years and was released right around the time I graduated from college. She's been home now nearly 17 years and is doing great. But my earliest memories as a child were going into jail, going into prison to visit my parents, waiting in line.
And part of your father represented himself, right? Is that one of the?
That's right. So my father represented himself, went to trial along with several co-defendants, and they were convicted of every charge. They didn't put on a legal defense. They didn't allow lawyers to be involved in their defense. They were arguing about the Black Liberation Movement and the context in which they'd committed this crime as part of a effort to raise money for the Black Liberation Army. And that's what they talked about. They talked about the politics of the crime rather than the facts or the law. So they were convicted of all counts, and the judge gave them the maximum sentence. About a year later, my mother was in the process of picking a jury, was in the final stages of starting her trial, and was able to negotiate a plea deal that resulted in the 20-year to life sentence she was given. So all that happened while I was an infant. I didn't really know what was going on, but I do remember visiting my parents during this process, in jail and then in prison. I still visit my father to this day. Of course, COVID makes that very hard, but visited him my whole life. And as a result, I got to see firsthand the failings of our criminal justice system. I saw how we systematically fail to support victims of crime or to invest in healing people who suffer because of crime, while we throw seemingly unlimited amounts of money at punishment and at a system that processes human bodies through cages in a way that's never been done in human history before. The United States leads the world in locking people up. We have 25% of the world's prisoners in this country. And for what? What does that do? Does it make us safer? Does it prevent crime? In fact, it makes us less safe. And I ran my campaign last year, as you remember, Katie, on a decarceral platform. I wanted to invest more resources in prevention and education and in healing and support for crime victims, and in communities, and also in alternatives to incarceration that can hold people accountable through things like restorative justice. What COVID has showed us that I didn't realize, that I didn't appreciate or talk about during my campaign, is that mass incarceration also undermines public safety by making us tremendously vulnerable to epidemics and pandemics.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, so you knew obviously it undermined public safety in terms of recidivism and in terms of taking away resources from the community. But right, this is a something that probably, I mean, did not cross a lot of people's minds.
Right. I mean, look, I spent nearly 40 years of my life visiting jails and prisons. I watched both of my parents navigate the AIDS epidemic while in prison, and seeing friends of theirs and people around them who had very little information about this virus contracting it, dying of it. Both of my parents did life-saving AIDS education work in their prisons in the late 80s and early 90s. But what we're seeing with COVID is a new and in many ways scarier reminder of something that's much more easy to contract and transmit. And that prisons and jails create the perfect conditions for spreading. You can't socially distance. You can't get access to alcohol-based hand sanitizer. You don't have access. My dad doesn't have access to a shower every day of the week. People have to share a phone with hundreds of other inmates. So all of the things that people in county jails double and triple bunked, living in dormitories, the churn, what we talk about churn, where people coming in and out every day. In our county jail in San Francisco, for example, we have about 800 staff members, even putting aside the people who are incarcerated there. Just the staff that come in and out every day, go home to their families and communities, and then go into the jail to do their jobs. Sheriff's deputies, civilian staff, Department of Public Health workers, all folks who can bring the disease in or bring it out back to their families. And it's why Cook County Jail in Chicago, for example, Marion Prison in Ohio, San Quentin Prison right here in the Bay Area, have all been epicenters, not just for spread of disease amongst people who are incarcerated, but also for the entire region that they're connected to. People coming in and out of the jail and prison to work and because of arrest and incarceration have all been vectors for the spread of the disease. And it's why in San Francisco, I'm so proud of the fact that we came together and followed the lead of our jail medical director, who said to us early on in March, you must drastically reduce the jail population or people will die unnecessarily. And we did it. We cut the jail population in a matter of weeks by more than a third, from peak to trough, nearly 50%.
What was the process for that?
You know, it required just taking a really close, systematic look at every single person who was in the jail, literally every single human being that's incarcerated, and saying, is there something short of incarceration that can keep the public safe? And in many cases, the answer was yes. People needed drug treatment. They needed housing. They needed reentry planning. I told you we had a woman who was pregnant and needed somewhere to go and get prenatal care off the streets. Why was she incarcerated in the first place? It required doing that work of not just accepting that jails are a necessary or inevitable response to every single kind of social transgression, but rather saying, no, this is going to be a last resort. And when we did that, we found a lot of people that shouldn't have been in jail.
When was the last time you were able to visit your dad?
The last time I saw him, let me just think. We speak on the phone pretty regularly, almost every week. But the last time I was able to visit him, I think was in, I want to say it was in February, but it might have been earlier. It might have been even earlier than that. It might have been December. I think it may have been December. I try to visit him a few times a year, but he just got moved to a new prison. I know I saw him in late December or early January. I'm not sure that I've seen him since then, but I think I saw him in early January.
And someone said your dad must be very proud of you. And it is an interesting. I remember you saying at an event I went for you, and this was not off the record, so I think it's fair for me to share, right? Plus, I mentioned the last time I interviewed you, but oh no, it's not. It's just that you said I asked you that during this event. I said something, asked you about how your parents responded. You said one of the hardest things for you was actually telling your dad that you were going to run for the DA's office. I'm wondering if he's, how his view of that has changed. Maybe it hasn't changed.
Yeah, it was a hard conversation for a lot of reasons, and I told you about that, Katie, when we spoke last. I won't repeat the whole story, but I was on a visit with him. This is now in late 2018, maybe November. I think November of 2018, and we were catching up and talking about the world and family and all that as we do on our visits. And then I sort of dropped this bomb on him that, like, hey, I'm getting ready to do something really different with my career. And he had a couple of guesses and didn't guess. And then when I told him I was going to run,
social worker or like,
right,
or I don't know, professor.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of
studies or something.
That kind of. He was like, "Are you going to move back to Latin America? You're
Right.
what? You know what?" And then I said, "No, I'm going to run to be San Francisco's district attorney." And you know, my dad knows me really well. I think he's proud of me. I'm his only son. He knows my character. He knows my values. So, you know, it's not like he thought I was running so that I could be a tough on crime, punitive prosecutor that was going to send as many people to prison for life as possible. And yet the system is so deeply entrenched. The way it works is so deeply entrenched. It's so hard to change. I think for him in that moment, there was real anxiety and fear, both for me personally in terms of what it means to be a public figure, what it means to run for office, and the stress and the sacrifices that the whole family has to make when you choose that path. But also, he knows how hard I work, and in many ways, trying to change a system like this one is a process of throwing yourself up against a brick wall over and over again. And so I think he worried about me, what it would do to me, and here we are 6 months in, and I haven't really been able to see him, but we do talk. And I think, like most parents, he's probably proud, and I think he still probably worries about, that I work too hard and don't make enough time for my wife and family and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And for him to be released would require a presidential pardon or
state? No, Governor Cuomo.
Okay. Oh,
yeah. Governor Cuomo. It wouldn't even need to be a pardon. Technically, just sort of point of information, a pardon is a process by which a governor or president can say, we're erasing your conviction. Right. You were wrongfully convicted, or for whatever reason, we're going to erase it. Clemency. Exactly. All he needs is clemency, which would be to convert his 75-year maximum sentence to the 40-year sentence that he served. And then he'd be eligible for parole. Governor Cuomo, actually granted clemency to one of my dad's co-defendants, Judy Clark, a couple of years ago. She's been released. She's doing really well. Obviously, people like my dad and Judy and my mom, people who have served a really long time, who are old. My dad's in his mid-70s, and who have good prison records, are the lowest risk to release. They have virtually 0% recidivism rate in that category. My dad has a job offer waiting for him if he does get released. So he is someone who the governor could very safely and easily release if there were the political will to do it.
Wow. So what can people do? I mean, not to sound naive, but are there petitions? We
did actually file a petition, a clemency petition with the governor. The governor is considering it. I don't know what that process looks like. It's not transparent or public. But we're hopeful that the governor will seriously consider it, and people can certainly tweet or send letters. I'm happy to. I don't know if there's maybe what I'll do, Katie, is I'll text you an email address. People can email if they are interested in getting involved.
Great. Awesome.
I'll text that to you now. Yeah.
Okay. Great. And could I assume that he could? Is there some kind of law that but is there some kind of like blanket standard, like he's going to free or grant clemency to everyone who, I don't know.
It's one of those areas that's totally discretionary.
Right.
And so it really, the governor of the state has almost total discretion to grant clemency or a pardon to anybody who's been convicted, currently serving time, or in the past in their state. The same way that the president has that power for federal convictions.
Right. And tell us about your new podcast, Chasing Justice.
Yeah, so it's really exciting. I'm new to the podcast world. I've been on I've been interviewed by you before, which is fun. But just a few weeks ago, together with someone in my office, also a former public defender named Rachel Marshall, we launched a podcast that allows us to talk about the issues we're working on in the San Francisco DA's office, but also to bring amazing guests on the show and talk about broader social, political issues, policy issues, and help provide a forum for people who are interested in criminal justice reform and social justice to learn about cutting edge issues. Our first episode had Professor James Forman, who wrote the Pulitzer Prize winning book, Locking Up our own, about the role that the Black middle class and political class played in the mass incarceration policies of the 80s and 90s. Our second guest was Professor Angela Davis, civil rights icon. And then our most recent guest we had on last week was State's Attorney Kim Foxx, who is also a progressive decarceral prosecutor and friend who runs the Cook County, Chicago DA's office. And we're going to have a lot of really exciting guests coming up talking about policy issues in our office and beyond.
And it's called Chasing Justice.
Chasing Justice, exactly. You can get it on iTunes, Stitcher, all that stuff. We've got a website, chasingjustice.com. We're on Twitter and Instagram. Definitely follow us, get involved. And, we'd love to get questions from people and also suggestions for what other guests we should have on. Maybe we should have your very own Katie Halper on one day.
Yeah, I could just be lawyers are sometimes very bad at, you're not, but lots of times I've noticed this whenever I'm writing, when I've written about a case, like lawyers are not very good sometimes at writing for non-lawyers. And then what happens is one journalist interprets it and they get it wrong. And then every other journalist who is not a lawyer, who doesn't understand it, copies that one misinterpretation. I don't mean legal theory or philosophy. It's something very, it'll be something very basic. But that email that you gave me, do you want me to publish that in the?
You can, sure.
Is that helpful? Should people be?
Sure. Yeah. People are interested in volunteering to help, really, this is at the end of the day, the process right now is primarily one of creating political pressure so that the governor feels comfortable doing the right thing.
Right.
It's a low risk thing for the governor, but obviously the police unions, will continue to push back. They love to see people die in prison, so that's just where we're at. So you can email us if you want, but the main thing is if you want to tweet at the governor, send emails or letters to the governor about it, just help create that space. Do
you have a hashtag Free David Gilbert?
We haven't been doing a social media campaign yet. At some point we may. We're hoping that we get some feedback from the governor's office, that we hear that they're seriously considering it, and if and when we do, then we would mobilize much more visibly.
Just so that people know, you can probably tell this is not something Chesa came on the show to ask. He didn't ask me to talk about this. It organically came up during this discussion. Yeah. But so is there some kind of unexpected, teachable moment from COVID in terms of finally it kind of forces the issue of releasing certain prisoners? And as you said, a lot of people have said, or still saying, if you free these people, you're going to have crime, in the streets. Have you seen it? Do you think this will have a lasting impact? Do you think this is going to be kind of a test case to show people, look, we can release a lot of these prisoners?
Yeah, I hope so, Katie. It's hard. I think it's a little early to tell. And it's one of those things where, and this is, why my campaign was based on a, grassroots movement. The organizing work I've done against the war in Iraq and other issues, immigration issues, immigrants' rights, have all been based on movement principles and organizing, rather than some belief that one person or one elected official is going to solve our problems. I'm not someone who's going to sit back and say, oh, we've learned the lesson, therefore surely everything will be right. I think it's up to all of us. We need to make sure that that's true. No question that we have seen clearly the risks of mass incarceration from a public health standpoint. We have seen in this period the opportunity to decarcerate in ways that do not increase crime. So I'll give you a statistic, just drop a footnote. Since March 16th, which was the date that shelter in place was ordered in San Francisco, until today, crime has dropped by over 33%. That's a huge drop. And meanwhile, we've reduced the jail population by even more. So this notion, as you say, that, oh, well, if you let the people who are in jail really need to be there or else we're all going to suffer, right? That's right. What we've been told by police unions and by traditional prosecutors and politicians for decades. We now have empirical demonstrable evidence that that's actually not the case. And if you invest in reentry and if you invest in prevention in communities and supporting folks coming home from jail, actually you can reduce crime by even more. But the question is, will it last, right? That's your question. Will it last? it's really up to us. We need people like me in district attorney's offices. We need people like all of your viewers to hold people like me accountable. And I saw in the live comments, a couple people here are in San Francisco and voted in my election last year. Thank you for your votes. And thank you for being engaged. It's so important at the local level. Even these races where you haven't heard of the candidates, you're not even fully sure what they do. Let me tell you something. Our efforts around police reform, around police accountability, around criminal justice reform, around budget equity, around racial justice, those are issues where, especially with the person we have occupying the White House today, the local elected officials have a tremendous amount of power and a huge, really underappreciated role to play in fixing some of these historic inequities.
So one of the things that, and it is a great podcast, and one of the things I heard you say with Angela Davis is you were saying how much you respected her. You're like, I mean, we have our political differences. Was wondering what some of those political differences were. And I know you've said about yourself, and you said on this episode, that you are decarceral but not abolitionist. So what does that mean?
Well, so that was the main thing in the context of that conversation that I was talking about. And after I said it, I don't want to spoiler alert for folks who haven't heard the pod yet, but then Angela turns around and says, well, actually, that sounds like you are an abolitionist to me. Yeah. So some of it is how you define it. And, we all choose different labels, right? Yeah. Gender, political, whatever. We all have a right to choose our own labels. So Angela is someone who's really been a pioneer in thinking about so many issues, gender equity and criminal justice. But in the context of that conversation, we were talking about her role in advancing the theory of prison abolition. And what I was saying is that I don't identify as a prison abolitionist, but I do believe that my job as a prosecutor, as an elected prosecutor, is to create policies that make our community safer wherever possible without relying on incarceration. And in the long term, ideally, and this I understand is a little pie in the sky, but ideally to organize myself out of a job.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
Like I want to live in a world where we don't need prosecutors or police. That may not happen in my lifetime. I'm not naive about the dangers and risks to public safety that exist, and I'm not naive about the systemic failings of our government to invest in healthy communities, healthcare, education, employment, mental illness, all those areas, addiction, that we've just allowed to fester and which create the conditions for crime. We need a response to that. And today I am the response in San Francisco. But in the long run, let's start before the problem and prevent the problem from occurring in the first place.
I know you're so busy. I just want to ask you two more questions. That's okay.
Sure.
What does defund the police mean to you? What should it mean? And also, your race was so close. And I mean, that's an example. I don't remember the numbers, but it was ridiculously close. What do you think? I mean, it's a combination, I'm sure, but what do you think some of the reasons that you won were, given all the odds that against you?
Yeah. So two big questions.
I know. I'm like, I'll let you go. Just
Now let's talk for an hour about these. No big deal. No big.
NBD,
no rush.
NBD. Yeah.
Exactly. So the defund police movement, to me. So again, I think I want to distinguish between defunding and abolition. I think there are some people involved in the defund movement who identify as abolitionists, and there's other people who do not. Mm-hmm. So for me, when we talk about defunding, I don't think about it as abolition. I think about defunding as how we allocate resources. So I think it's a really simple question, and it's one, ironically, that should appeal to all of the kind of Republicans that claim, now disingenuously in many instances, to be fiscal conservatives, right? I think it's a question of saying, okay, we have tax dollars that are precious and limited, and we need to choose every year. When we do our budget, every year, constantly, we need to choose, how do we invest those resources? What do we do with our tax dollars? Do we build another hospital? Do we build a better school? Do we give our teachers a raise? Or do we allow our police to militarize and buy tanks, right? I mean, those are like real choices. There's more, of course, but those are real choices that we as elected officials have to make every year when we do our budgets. And the defund the police movement, I take as a demand that local budget making bodies, the Board of Supervisors or the state legislature or what have you, look seriously at ways to cut police budgets in order to invest. It's really about investment and divestment more than about defunding for me. It's about where can we spend that money. San Francisco, for example, we have about $700 million that goes every year to the police department. For point of comparison, my office's budget is less than 70 million, so less than a tenth of what the police get. And starting salaries for police in San Francisco are more than 50% higher than starting salaries for teachers. So defund is more a question of saying, how do we allocate resources? What do we choose to invest in? And what's going to give us the best return on that investment? And I think there's a wide recognition that much in the way the military-industrial complex at the national level for so many decades led to ever-growing, ballooning military expenditures, and neither Republican nor Democrat felt comfortable critically examining that massive expenditure and saying, well, maybe we can actually be more efficient with this money. The same thing has happened at the local level with policing. The budgets just grow and grow and grow and grow every year without any real accountability for how that money is being spent or what the return on that investment is. Your second question was about the November 2019 DA race when I won. And it was a very close race. So for context, San Francisco uses something called ranked choice voting, which, if people are not familiar, is a system that allows every voter to put their first choice, second choice, third choice, and on down as many candidates as exist. And it's confusing to many folks, but the basic premise, I'll give you an example of where it would have made a big difference in American history. Let's say that we use that system for presidential elections. And let's say that in 2000, the year that Gore lost to George W., voters in the state of Florida, but voters in the state of Florida, or the election was stolen or decided by the Supreme Court, but we all know that had a few hundred extra votes in Florida gone to Al Gore, that he would, had they not been stolen, he would have then technically won Florida, which would have given him the whole country the Electoral College. Many people that year in Florida voted for Ralph Nader, the Green Party candidate. And they did that in broad terms because they didn't like Al Gore and they didn't like George W. But almost all of those people were more aligned with Gore than with Bush.
Yeah.
They maybe didn't want to vote for Gore, and they wanted their vote to be a protest vote against their issues with the Democratic Party or with Al Gore personally as a candidate. But in a ranked choice voting system, everybody could have voted for Ralph Nader as their first choice and then put their second choice as Al Gore. And once Ralph Nader gets eliminated, once he doesn't have enough votes to be in the top two, all of his ballots then get reallocated to the second choice vote on them. It allows, in some ways, a more truly democratic process because it empowers voters to put their real first choice, even if it's a candidate who has no prospect of winning. Right. In our race, the first round of votes, there were 4 candidates. I was in the lead amongst the 4 after the first round of voting. And I was about 9,000 votes ahead of the nearest competitor in a race where there was a total of 206,000 votes cast. So a pretty small margin. After the second round, when the first candidate, the least vote-getting candidate had been eliminated, I was still in the lead by about 6,000 or 7,000 votes. And then after the third least vote-getting candidate was eliminated, and it was down to the top 2, I won by about 2,500 votes, or a little over 1% of the remaining votes. So it was a very close race, and it was one that we couldn't have succeeded in, but for a tremendous grassroots movement. The energy, the volunteers, the phone banking, the door knocking, all of it was really spectacular. It was in many ways unprecedented for a local race like this. And it's the same movement that got me elected that has fed into and been part of this broader national Black Lives Matter movement and movement demanding police transparency, accountability, and criminal justice reform. And I'm so humbled to have a seat at the table, to be in a position in this critical, pivotal moment in American history to try to implement changes and set examples for other offices and other jurisdictions about some of the concrete things we can do at the local level to really change the game and put the justice back in the system.
And anyone you are endorsing?
Lots of people I'm endorsing, depending on the race. I'm not sure which one you're looking at.
Let's see, Shahid Buttar.
Haven't endorsed him, but he's a good friend. I'm a big fan of his. Really smart guy. I've done a lot of campaigning with him, side by side with him. I have not endorsed in that race, but really excited. If you're not familiar with him, you should check him out. He's challenging Nancy Pelosi from the left. He's really smart. Really. Different than your typical, U.S. Congressperson, and someone who's, again, like my campaign, running a grassroots campaign, rooted in community, broad, intellectual, hardworking, people's candidate. So he's definitely someone to check out. I'm excited about him. Lawyer, yeah, Stanford lawyer. Well, got the fancy degree, but didn't let that go to his head.
Right, like someone else I know. I went to a small law school in Connecticut.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta ask the question. I don't like doing this. I'm very assertive, but not with my guests. But why not endorse him?
No, you're not the only one. You're not the only one. I see who's that. Other people are endorsing. It's just local politics. I mean, right. It's an option. I mean, I've been out there campaigning with him. I've spoken at his campaign events. And matter of fact, get this. The Mojo, you guys are going to laugh, but the Mojo is like right there. So my campaign headquarters, the physical office that we use for our campaign, is now his campaign headquarters. Literally the same office space. So it's, it's all family.
Yeah, yeah. So you haven't endorsed him.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to make sure people know about what's happening? I definitely want to recommend your podcast. Also, ask Angela if she regrets at all not endorsing Bernie Sanders now that we have Joe Biden as the nominee.
I will ask
feminism racks up that. Yeah, please. And tell her we would love to have her on the show, Katie.
I will.
Yeah.
I will. She was a high school classmate of my mom, Kathy.
Oh, okay.
That's how I know her. So we go way back.
Right. And Chase and I go way back.
Summer camp.
Yeah. Camp Kinderland, which everyone should donate. I'm going to put a link to that. Everyone should donate. Yeah. Well,
it's great to see you. Yeah, great to see you, Katie.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you
so much. Have me back anytime. Keep rabble rousing. I want you to keep. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep pushing you to endorse Shahid.
Yeah, like I said, he's my guy. I had a conversation with him really early before I had even announced my campaign. He was one of the first people I spoke to about my decision to run for DA. So a lot of respect for him. Really excited about what he's been able to accomplish. Yeah. And people should definitely support him. He's great. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Chesa.
Thank you. Talk to you all soon. Have a good night.
You too. And everyone check out his podcast, and I'll put it in the link. That was great, huh? Wow, that was great. Yeah, I've known Chesa for years because we did go to the same summer camp. Everyone should definitely check out Chasing Justice. And what else? Anyone have any questions for me? Because we have our next guest coming in. I may actually be able to book another one. Let me just see what happens. I don't want to make it seem like these people are, not special, and they're very busy. Let's see. One second. Let me just see if I can get this guy in for a little bit. If I do, it's going to be very, it'll be a very white. Oh no, not too white. Yes. Somewhat white male. Let me just see. I have some really good guest guys coming up. One second. I'm just sharing this with a potential guest. But if not, we still got Asad no matter what, which is great. Okay, one second. By the way, did everyone see our last live stream? It's really good. It was really good, I think. And I think that Ken Klippenstein was such a good and interesting guest. I gotta say, You know, Nando Villa and I talked about Joyanne Reed and how she's replacing Chris Hayes. And I was looking at some of Nando and I were reviewing some of the worst moments from Joyanne Reed and Chris Matthews. Sorry, Chris Matthews, not Chris Hayes, Chris Matthews. And I just remembered how incredibly disappointing Warren was. And I tweeted this out earlier, like, you know, she, I think, did more damage. I know we're all supposed to be like looking forward and unity, but she did more damage to progressives than Biden could have ever done. And she was way worse to Bernie than Biden was. It's just like, it's really disturbing. I mean, I'd forgotten about how angry and infuriating that was. Jesus Christ. Oh yeah, Warren endorsed Hickenlooper. And someone pointed out that she endorsed Bowman pretty late in the race, which is true. So it didn't cost her any political, anything political. She's a capitalist for her bones. I know she was never that progressive, but that's kind of doesn't relate to, that doesn't have anything to do with, I would say, whether or not she was able to do more damage. I just can't get over that I cannot get over the fact that she said that Bernie had said to her, he didn't think a woman could win. That was so entitled. Oh my God, it was so gross, dishonest and entitled of her. Like, that made any sense. And then, honestly, how dare she? She leaked that story with 4 witnesses, which were 4 people that Warren either lied to or was wrong to be charitable. I'm sure she just didn't get what Bernie meant. And I'm assuming, to be charitable, she didn't totally make it up. Who knows? I'm assuming what happened is he, you know, as I said last week, you know, look, Liz, it's going to be very hard. They're going to go after you for whatever you do. And, you know, you being a woman, blah, blah, blah. As he said, you know, he hasn't said that. He went around talking about how Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. He's so decent. It's like, it's almost sickening. And remember, she wouldn't shake his hand. Jesus Christ. Yeah, seriously. So, okay, let's see. Ryan M. Thank you for that. General strike on rotation by industry to sustain. And then I got another super chat. Keep rabble-rousing. I like that. Let's see, another super chat. Let's see, I got another super chat. Where is it? Where'd it go? Oh no, wait, can I see it on? If you super chatted above, can you repost your question? And I will, you know, address it or respond to it. Super chatting is great, guys. It's a way to show your appreciation of the show. And yeah, I feel bad because I definitely missed one of them. Any other questions? Any other stories we should be talking about? Yeah, Warren, geez Louise. Yeah, and I do think she'd be better than, I really do. I think she'd be better than Kamala as a vice president. I mean, her policies are better. I don't know. In terms of electability, I don't know. I'm checked out on that issue. I don't know who would be better. I think that Trump is pretty, well, no, I won't say that actually. He's safer. No. He's more vulnerable than I would have thought he would have been. Okay, why is Lena Dunham trending? Let's do some live Twitter fights. Okay, Lena Dunham was 23 when she sold Girls Age Field with a 1.5-page-long pitch without character. All right, sorry. I'm like really kind of over Lena Dunham takes. Like, I have issues with her. Oh yeah, that was good. That was really good. Really good. Someone says that help. I don't know how to super chat. Can someone explain it? I think you did it. Was it you? But okay, let's talk about this. Do you have a link for the Bernie thing? It was great. I have it at Democracy Now. I can go to that. Let's do add to stream. Where's my Democracy Now window? Anyone want to like volunteer next week to help me run this stuff? You can be in the green room and help me run this stuff. So like when I say something, it sounds, yeah. I'm also looking for a producer. So, you know, either of those things. Hold on. Where? Oh, here we go. Okay. Where's the one where she said, let's see, Sanders. Here we got it. Bernie Sanders proposes 10% cut to Pentagon budget to invest in health and education. I wish I could show the video of that, but I don't have a person helping me with this. Hold on. Is this even visible? It is, right? Thank you, Garden Gnome. All right, 10% weak AF, sure, but like, all right, it adds up. Senator Bernie Sanders has proposed a sweeping 10% cut to the military budget, saying the money could be invested instead in education, healthcare, and poverty reduction. If the horrific pandemic we are now experiencing has taught us anything, it is that national security is not just building bombs, missiles, jet fighters, tanks, submarines, nuclear warheads, and other weapons of mass destruction. Sanders spoke on the floor of the Senate on Thursday, on the same day President Trump visited a shipyard in Wisconsin, where he boasted about the administration's colossal military spending. We've totally rebuilt the military, $2.5 trillion. I can't do his accent. And some people would say, well, that's out of the budget. I said, let me tell you something. There is no budget when it comes to our military. Again, guys, wait, the Pentagon's budget is larger than the next 11 nations combined. You know what I'm going to say about Donald Trump there? This is another moment of Trump or Chomsky. Trump said it, but you could imagine Chomsky saying it from a different moral perspective, obviously. You could imagine Chomsky saying, there is no budget when it comes to the U.S. military. Just saying. We got to have a Trump or Chomsky hashtag, right? Okay, what else? Let me check on my guest who's coming in soon. I really appreciate all you guys watching this because I really do. Really appreciate it. And, you know, this is a work in progress and it's new. Let me just make sure my guest is coming on. And if you have any questions for him, take me on tonight. Okay. Sorry. I like that song by the Smiths. I hate the song River by Joni Mitchell. Here is my hot take of the day. Okay, I do have a lot of windows open. I need to, oh my God, this is brilliant. Trumpsky, really good. I do have a lot of windows open. I have a condition called tabitis. Yeah, sure. I'd love to have Stephanie Kelton on. I have a condition called tabitis. And yeah, smash the like button. Exactly. Oops, I need to smash it. Yeah, you do. Don't be a hypocrite. I don't like the song River by Joni Mitchell. And I think that it was never good. And I think that we should stop playing it. And it really bothers me during the holiday season. And I hate every cover of it gets worse and worse. So that's my hot take of the day. That's my, remember cancel culture? That's my cultural cancel of the week. The song River by Joni Mitchell. I'm over it. I've been over it. Okay, thank you, Brian Frederick. Will Biden recognize annexation of the West Bank? I assume so. He's pretty bad on that stuff, right? What do you guys think? Oh, wow. Wait, we got to talk about this. This is interesting. I'm always anti-Canuck. Oh, right. She is Canadian. How many covers have I heard? There's Sarah McLachlan, who's just terror. I mean, I actually like a lot of her original stuff, but I don't like her version of it. Who else? Apparently Bruce Springsteen has a version of it. I haven't heard it. Of course, he's APAC. Yeah, I don't think Biden. we had Ali Abu Nima, and I'm gonna have him on this, but we had him on Useful Idiots, and there was like one difference between Biden and Trump. This is funny. Who should I invite for show? Joni Mitchell? Biden won't even recognize his own face in the mirror. Who should I invite on? You guys want to see a really disturbing video? When I say disturbing, I mean like upsetting. Hold on. Hold on. I kind of couldn't believe this. Okay, this was epic. You guys may remember we had Samelis Lopez on the show. All right, you know what I'm going to do? I got to I think close basically all my windows. Let me just go through a bunch of window closures. Has everyone subscribed to this channel on the YouTubers, on the YouTubes? Oh, right. Okay, remind me. I want to talk Lena Dunham, and I want to talk disturbing video, which we're about to see. Someone put Lena Dunham in the chat. Sorry, so I remember. I got kind of overwhelmed. You know what's a great song, by the way? Atlantic City by Bruce Springsteen. And I gotta say, pretty amazing version by the band. I almost like that one more. What do you think? Vote, guys. This is participatory democracy. Hold on. I have probably like 60 windows open right now. Okay. Hold on. All right. Who should I invite on? Oh, Lena Dunham. That's who I should invite on? Oh. Oh God, the white power thing. Okay, I shouldn't yeah, I will definitely have Lena Dunham on. What's the probability? I mean, what does that mean? Like, I'm not being, it's not rhetorical, but how would that even play out? What is the probability that the Bernie phenomenon was nothing more than a trick to prevent the rise of a nadir, like third-party challenge? I mean, you don't mean that like Bernie was in on it. You're just saying, like, is that why, like on an evolutionary level? I like the song, by the way, Carrie, and what's the other one with C? Carrie. The other one with this, California. Carrie, California. I also really don't like the song Pave Paradise and Put Up a Parking Lot. I mean, I agree with it, except maybe I don't agree with banning DDT, because I think that gave us bed bugs. Give me spots on my apples and bed bugs, but leave me the birds and the bees. I mean, I'm a little conflicted. Blue, let's see. Okay, I don't know who this person is. I'll look into him. Christos Aivalis, for a Canadian discussion about why Canada sucks. Yeah, but we got to talk Greece also. Get Nathan Robinson on. Yeah, I should mediate a debate between him and Matt Taibbi, my co-host. Okay, I want to show you guys. Okay, so we got Lena Dunham, white power, and those are not related. Oh my God, that sounds like such like every graduate student. Lena Dunham, white power, and carceral feminism. Okay, so here we go. Ready? I'm gonna play. Yeah, okay. Lena Dunham is annoying, but like, I actually find the people who constantly talk about Lena Dunham way more annoying and problematic than Lena Dunham. Yeah, I said it. And I also think, like, yeah, Lena Dunham, of course she's privileged, but it's a bit of a, not to sound like one of the feminists I always critique, but like every single successful man has had the kind of privilege she has. Now you could say, well, it's different because they don't claim to be feminists, but whatever. I mean, she's done good stuff. I don't particularly like Girls, but I think it's pretty well done. Like, it almost feels like a documentary. And I thought parts of Girls, you know, some episodes of Girls was funny. And I mean, you're going to kill me, but I do think it's kind of cool that she walked around naked. and or nearly naked, and doesn't really have a typical, I don't know how to say this, but what people consider an attractive body. I mean, that sounds terrible. But I think she would describe it that way. That's not judgments on my part. It's just, on my part of her parts. Hello. Okay, hold on. So what was I looking at for right now? I was just going to get, this terrible thing. Okay, and Asad Haider is coming on very shortly. But guys, look at this. Okay, let me screen share this. You guys, this is pretty disturbing. Now, remember, we had Samelis Lopez on, and we liked her a lot, and we wanted her to win. And one of the things she talked about, you guys may remember.
Hello, I'm Richie Torres.
One of the things she talked about was foreign policy and how she wanted humane, humanistic foreign policy. Okay. And she even talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and she was endorsed by Jewish Voices for Peace. One second. I'm just telling us. I emailed it to you. Yeah, Jewish Voices for Peace. So, hold on, I got to go back to this thing and shut this thing off. Jewish Voices for Peace endorsed him. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna cancel Richie. Do I need like an I may need an Afro-Latinx LGBTQ person to cancel it for me, so I can tag them to cancel. Okay, so let's watch this. This guy beat Samelis, and this guy was endorsed by, last week we canceled Sean McElwee. I don't know if he's still around. Someone can tell me. We canceled him in large part because he did Samelis dirty by saying, basically he's a consultant, but he plays the role of a pollster. You got to commit to one side, as Corky Sinclair said in Waiting for Guffman when he couldn't fit in his pants. And he's like, I'm trying to commit to one side here, dear. Waiting for Guffman is so underrated. Okay, so here's Richie. Ready?
Hello, I'm Richie Torres. I am Afro-Latino, LGBTQ, millennial, progressive, and pro-Israel. And I'm pro-Israel not despite my progressivism, but...
Can people hear this? Can everyone hear this? Yes? Volume okay? Volume okay? Someone tell me. If not, you guys will complain.
But because of it. The first time I ever traveled outside the United States was when I went to Israel. As a kid, I was too poor to travel abroad. And the most powerful experience was my trip to Jerusalem. It's known to be the holiest city in the world, home to people, the most devout people of Jewish and Christian and Muslim faith.
Did he say developed or devout?
And I was struck that even a city as religious as Jerusalem had an open house, an LGBT open house. And that to me spoke volumes about Israel's commitment to LGBTQ equality and visibility. There is no country.
Okay, let's just unpack this a little bit. So far he has done the Israel is the best thing for LGBTQ people. What else has he done? Being pro-Israel is part of his progressivism, not despite it. Excuse me. And this is called pinkwashing, in case people don't know. Yes, I actually, Yasha is coming on the show soon. Let's just say he was maybe supposed to be coming on the show. All right. And it had to reschedule. I'm not saying which show. Could have been tonight. Could have been last week. Could have been last week tonight. How do you like that? I'm thinking of calling this show this week tonight, last week tonight. No, I can't do that. That last week this evening. And then maybe I'll release it tomorrow. When I release it, like an audio or clips of it tomorrow, it can be called last night. Just an idea. Okay, yeah, Yasha Levine is like amazing. Okay, so let's go and watch the rest of this. Like, it is so over. What struck me is how over the top it is. It's almost like parody.
In the Middle East, equality and visibility. Even a city as religious as Jerusalem had an open house, an LGBT open house. And that to me spoke volumes about Israel's commitment to LGBTQ equality and visibility. There is no country in the Middle East more protective of LGBTQ dignity and humanity than the state of Israel. It is truly an oasis of democracy in a region known for brutal authoritarianism.
Okay, that's something that I kind of feel like people know not to say out loud. It's like such a classic, like, brutal authoritarianism. I guess is, you know, Israel is the it's the OG of wokeness, by the way. Like, they really weaponize trauma and oppression to justify doing some pretty bad stuff. All right, so.
And having been to Israel twice, I can tell you firsthand that I feel at home in Israel as though it were my own country, because it has values that are recognizably democratic and recognizably pro-LGBTQ. And so I'm proud to be both pro-LGBTQ and pro-Israel, because the two are inextricably bound together as progressive values.
Oi, I'm getting off verklempt. That is like ridiculous. I'm sure he did not set foot in Gaza. Yeah, Middle East only demands democracy. Okay, yeah, I really couldn't believe that. So yeah, that's Richie. Richie Torres really would have appreciated some Elise Lopez. And by the way, Sean predicted that she would get 2%. She got 12 or 13%. Just saying. Okay, what else? That was a great interview, huh, with Chesa? Did he even set foot in? Yeah, right. That would have been nice. Guys, super chat. Hit that super chat. If you want to ask Asad some questions, if you want to ask me some questions, let me tweet out that we just added him. I can't believe that. That was really ridiculous. I think that's also was that his first, I believe that was his first video, which is unbelievable. Okay, so why is Lena Dunham trending? Oh, and then the white power thing. We'll talk about that with Asad. Let's see. Just waiting for my guests, by the way. Get ready for another round of Russiagate, indeed. Okay, that's okay. I have yet to anonymously fund my YouTube. There goes super chat. And this just came out. Lena Dunham is trending because girls sold without a script, and we just learned that. Okay. I wonder, and then FSSFS, aka semicolon KSDD, said, I wonder if he also supports Israel when they slaughter LGBT Palestinians. You left out the Q. Sorry, I'm just making fun of people who weaponize that stuff and are not. Let's see. Hello. Wait, what was I just saying? Oh, there he is. All right, I got to tell you something. Hold on. I'm just adding you the stream. Are you there?
I'm there.
All right. Okay, you're live. You're live.
All right.
And I want to tell you the first thing. I want to speak a little bit of truth to power, because someone thought, where is it? Asad. Where is it? Someone wrote that Asad had passed out. Where is it? After, oh wait, I just saw it. Hold on. Asad is passed out after slamming an entire bottle of bitters. True or false?
No, I have not had a bottle of bitters today.
Good for you.
No.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, but there are some nice drinks which use bitters as a main ingredient.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
And you can share some of those if you want at some point.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right. Oh, the hair. I see it. Now I see the gravitas is weighing it down.
Right.
Right. Now I get it. I don't think that was there before. But now I see it. Okay.
Yeah.
It really is a game changer. It totally changes the shape. Happens with me in my hair too.
Well, yeah, we'll see what happens as we go forward. I mean, I'm just like, haircuts just don't seem like the right choice right now. So.
Just because you like the hair, you like the results so much.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the public health aspect of it, but also just that I kind of want to commit to this. You know?
Right. Yeah. In a world of uncertainty.
Yeah.
So Asad, thank you so much. I think you're our most frequent return guest, and that is because the people have spoken and they really like your hair and your thoughts.
That's
they like
very nice.
everything going on up here. What are you drinking, by the way?
This is a rum and coconut concoction.
Sounds really good, actually.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a watermelon infused sangria. When I say infused, it's not infused. It's just as chunks of watermelon.
You just put watermelon in it, yeah.
Yeah, my mom made it, and it has some mint and lemon and mint and lime.
Sounds
Anyway.
like a salad, yeah.
Yeah, it is good. So, Asad, how is New York City? How are the protests? Have you been to any recently?
Yeah, I was just earlier, Washington Square Park, came out of the queer march. There was some.
You came out?
The events that I attended came from the queer march. And
I thought that
there was some confrontation with police. And it's not clear. I mean, I heard reports that there was pepper spray. I didn't see or smell that. And there was an attempt to de-arrest some people. I'm not sure if they were successful or not. And I saw a couple of arrest vans, you know. I don't know if they actually filled them. So that was actually much more confrontational than what I've been seeing lately.
And this was a this was a queer march?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was organized that way? I mean, like that was what it was called, or what?
That's what it was called, yeah.
Okay.
But I haven't seen the previous marches being that confrontational in the recent week, maybe. So that was different, but I think it fizzled out, and there's the rain and everything. So so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Have you ever been pepper sprayed?
No, I've been tear gassed. I don't think I've been pepper sprayed.
Okay, what was the tear gas like?
Tear gas is like your eyes and your nose and throat suddenly are irritated. I mean, it's not like you smell something. It's not like you get the idea that there's something it's just that your own body starts to freak out in reaction. And but now everybody's wearing masks, so
Okay.
Still irritate the eyes.
What do you say about the eyes?
I mean, if you have a mask, it helps a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
With your respiratory system, but it'll still irritate your eyes.
Okay, and what about, have you ever seen anyone hit by rubber bullets?
No.
Yeah, that's something that I feel like actually really needs to be talked about more, because I think that like people think of those things as very casual. Same thing with like when people, speaking of casual, when people talk about casualties, like I was always like, oh, that's good, just casualties. Like there are all these deaths. Okay, some casualties, but that could mean like losing both limbs, like an arm, a leg, both legs, especially speaking of Israel, where it's like very intentional maiming. And we were speaking of Israel earlier, by the way, because of very woke city councilmen who defeated, sadly, our mutual friend, Samelis Lopez. Right. I don't know if you saw this. He tweeted about why, as an Afro-Latinx LGBTQ progressive millennial, he supports Israel, not despite his progressivism, but because of it. And they are an oasis of democracy in an area known for brutal authoritarianism. Right. Unbelievable, Hasbara. So yeah, anyway, I've just been thinking about that because it's such an easy, I mean, luckily it's awful, but luckily there are photos now of people's faces and bodies. I mean, people losing an eye because of rubber bullets. So
yeah, I mean, these are weapons. I mean, there's no, they call them non-lethal and everything, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a brutal instrument. I mean, yeah.
And they can be lethal also, but either way, it shouldn't have to be lethal for us to oppose it.
I mean, the idea also that they're using tear gas and pepper spray at a time when, there's a respiratory illness that is, just, I mean, it's insane.
Right.
It's just so fundamentally irresponsible at a level of public health.
Yeah.
You can't, no excuse.
Yeah, it really is. And there should be, I mean, that should be a demand made of the people who are supposed to keep law and order and are invested in public safety.
Yeah, well, they're not. That's not what they do. So
spoiler alert. Yeah. Do you know what this is? I don't know what this is.
I have no idea what that is.
What is that? We have a lot of thoughts on that we will get to. This is true. I'm sure you saw this, right? A 22-year-old protester died from tear gas exposure.
I didn't see that, but it's an incredible tragedy and crime.
I believe she was. Did she have asthma? I believe it was something. But that's another thing they like to do is they like to pretend that
it was their fault.
Yeah. I mean, they did that with Eric Garner. Then they tried to do it with George Floyd. Like all these people who are blaming their deaths on something, like allegedly being on some drug, as if those things are death sentences, which they're not supposed to be. Yeah, she did have asthma, but like the idea that, oh no, she didn't have asthma. Okay, that was initially said, but she didn't. Okay. Anyway, either way, terrible. And Kyle Jones says they ruptured a guy's testicle with rubber bullets. The guy had previously worked with cops on sensitivity training. Oh, I saw that. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, the idea that you have to be in tip-top shape. Like, I invite all the people saying that to undergo whatever the people who they're talking about went through. Like have a cop kneel on their neck or put them in a chokehold. Oh yeah, Elijah McClain. It's another one. It was administered ketamine. Did you see that latest story?
I saw some mention of that. That's really surprising. Yeah. And
then there was a protest actually for him. I mean, against his murder, and the police broke that up violently. So anyway, what is keeping you safe right now?
Safe from what?
Not safe, sorry. Healthy. What's the word? Sane. sorry, that's ableist. What is keeping you? How are you keeping up your faith, your hope?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, that's not easy to do.
Right.
You know, I mean, you can be kind of lifted by events that occur that seem to that take you by surprise. They can lift you up, but then at the same time, you know, it's not always like that, and you have to be able to kind of maintain your commitment in the periods that are in which you're defeated, and you know, in which you can't draw on some already existing source of inspiration. And I mean, that means political commitment. There's no alternative to that. And unfortunately, though, the dominant ways of conceiving of politics are so dependent on the administration and modification of what already exists, rather than thinking in terms of the possibility of things being different, that then it becomes very hard to maintain that commitment. Because if you're just, you know, if your hope is based on an outcome, like the outcome of an election or the outcome of some particular street protest or confrontation, then it can't withstand those moments of defeat, or the moments in which the energy wanes, in which you don't see action. And so hope really has to be based on a kind of commitment which isn't about the outcome. You have to have hope in the sense that you can have hope which is based more on the past than on the future, in the sense that you recognize that throughout history, against all odds, people have stood up to oppression and exploitation, and that our position now is to carry forward that commitment. You know, I mean, you look back, there's so many examples. I mean, you look back at the civil rights movement and people who faced death, people who were killed, who were standing up for basic human dignity. And how can you say, after people made that kind of sacrifice, demonstrated that level of commitment, how can we say that now we're going to lose hope? You know?
Yeah.
So I think you have to have that longer perspective, the broader perspective, than the one that's just about the present or the one that's about predicting outcomes.
So it's almost a backwards viewing hope.
It's a hope which is based on commitment to the principle, rather than on the idea that something will happen in the future.
And you can take solace from the past.
Yeah, and from the present. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's always moving when I think about those things and I read about them, and it gives you like goosebumps, like people's final words. But it can also, depending on your mood and perspective, and you know, it can also be incredibly discouraging. But it is very moving. I feel a visceral response to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm more affected by examples of people who stand up for their dignity against, you know, all of these horrible forms of violence and oppression than I am by the suffering. You know, the suffering, you know, you're moved by the suffering. But I think what's truly moving is that people can't be reduced to their suffering. People stand up and say no. That's truly moving.
Yeah. So are you reading certain texts? Are you remembering certain things? Is it people you see out on the streets? Do you have any like particular, and I know of course it's not about the individual, but
I would say if people are looking for things to read right now, one thing I'd recommend is a very short book by Alain Badiou called The Rebirth of History, which is about riots. And it's about riots in general, and it was sort of specifically prompted by the Arab Spring. And it holds up in many very relevant ways in this moment. So if you want to think through the historical meaning of riots and the problems of political organization that they raise, that's a great book. On a more concrete level, if you want to look at the history of riots in the United States, a great book is Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, which is about the Great Rebellion in Detroit in 1967 and the organizations that came out of it, the most famous of which is the League of Revolutionary Black Workers.
Oh, okay.
It's a classic text. And those are two that immediately come to mind that I would highly recommend in thinking about this current moment.
Okay, great. Can you? I'll link to them. What are they called? Or you can yeah. What are they called?
The Rebirth of History by Badiou.
How do you spell his name?
Badiou. And then Detroit, I Do Mind Dying.
Wait, Badiou.
Badiou.
IOU. Okay. And
Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. Detroit,
okay.
I Do Mind
Dying. I Do Mind Dying. And that's by
Dan Georgiakis and Marvin Sirkin.
How do you spell Georgiakis?
Yes, let's put the title.
All right, fine. By Dan and Martin? All right.
Marvin.
Okay. Now, some questions that we got. One of them is, well, this is a nice reminder. Talking about final words. Is this true? Kirk Douglas's final words were Mike can get it done about Mike Bloomberg? Don't know if that's true.
I know.
Well, you are a huge fan of both Douglases.
Well, Kirk Douglas played Spartacus.
Yeah.
In the movie, which was written by Dalton Trumbo, based on the novel by Howard Fast, and that's a great example of. Okay, so this is, first of all, it's an example of just the history of communists in Hollywood and the major role that they played in American culture. That's interesting to remember. And I thought that the movie about Dalton Trumbo was, perfectly fine. It wasn't like the greatest cinematic achievement, but it was an interesting picture of his life.
Oh, I thought you were calling it a picture.
Yeah, one of my favorite pictures. Yeah. And then Spartacus, it's an example of what we were talking about earlier. And actually, Badiou has a very interesting passage in one of his more technical philosophical books called Logics of Worlds, in which he says, okay, you had the slave revolt in ancient Rome, which is represented in the figure of Spartacus. But then you see that figure, that Spartacus he has echoes throughout history. And so at the time of the Haitian Revolution, in the 18th century, the first successful slave revolt, there's a French abolitionist who describes Toussaint Louverture, the leader of the revolt, as the Black Spartacus. So there's an echo of the classical slave revolt in this slave revolt in modernity. And then you have the moment of the German Revolution at the beginning of the 20th century, in which is called the Spartacist revolt. Once again, referring back to Rosa Luxemburg is the most famous participant in it, along with Liebknecht. And So you see the echo of this figure throughout history, and that's an example of the way that in all these different situations, totally different situations, the principle of emancipation appears, it resurges, and it's something that across all of this history can't be suppressed. And so that's part of what I was talking about before about hope, is that you see that across all of this history, you know, the persistence of slavery, the persistence of capitalism, you still see the echoes of this revolt, and a common principle of emancipation, a common principle of egalitarianism, the idea that slaves can and should be free. It appears throughout history. You know, no power has ever been able to suppress this completely.
That is a.
So that's my comment on Kirk Douglas, who played Spartacus. And Tony Curtis, as someone has brought up, who says, "I am Spartacus." You know.
Yeah.
That's a key moment, you know, where in which everybody says, "I am Spartacus,"
right,
because they want to join in the principle of revolt that Spartacus represents.
Yeah. Also, Some Like It Hot. Great movie.
That's also a good
very good movie. Yeah. You know, I grew up watching black and white movies, and like, I didn't like cartoons as a kid, so I'd watch black and white movies, musicals, and fairy tale theater, which had like real actors playing the fairy tales characters.
Wow.
Yeah. Jeff Bridges played Rapunzel's, both a little Freudian weird, Rapunzel's father and boyfriend.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. Malcolm McDowell played the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood. Anyway, okay, another question. What do you think of the Party of Socialism and Liberation, PSL?
I don't give opinions on particular organizations.
Oh, okay. Because you don't want to alienate people?
Well, I can't paint a whole organization with one particular brush. I mean, there are many organizations on the left, and there are many reasons why people choose to join one or the other, and I can't give a general opinion on that.
Wow, okay. It's so diplomatic. Well, what about, what do you think of, and you won't talk about, yeah, that was Shelley Duvall's series. I don't know if it's on Showtime, but it was hers. Okay, well, why don't you give us a, yeah, you wouldn't comment on Trotskyism or Stalinism, but you did say everything is communism. It's all communism. Well, okay, well, what criteria do you have for political organizations?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I mean, the problem that we have had in the United States for a long time, and this goes back to the example of Trumbo, we were just talking about, which is the extraordinary repression of the communist movement that happened as a result of McCarthyism and so on. And also as the result of some poor decisions by communists to ally themselves with the Democratic Party and so on in a way that was very demobilizing for them.
That would be a great, by the way, great book, album cover or memoirs title, Poor Decisions by Communists.
Yeah, that would be a long book.
Yeah.
But I think that that's the problem that we face now when we look at the prospects for left organizations today, which is that we don't have the kind of legacy that, for example, in Europe, there were massive communist parties up through the 70s, millions of members. And we didn't have anything like that. And you go back in history before McCarthyism and you see other reasons why the United States has never developed a socialist movement in the way that Europe did. And, there are many theories. And one theory has been that race in the United States has been a major obstacle to the development of a serious socialist movement. That is, racism operated as a successful strategy of social control that was able to divide the working class and the communist movement, and that since white socialists and white communists were frequently unable to recognize the independent validity of the demands of black movements, they were unable to formulate a mass kind of organization. And I think that theory has some power. Yeah.
Earlier in the show, I had on Chesa Boudin, whose parents were in, he's the DA of San Francisco, whose parents were in the Weather Underground. And and his mom is now out of jail. His dad is basically, barring some clemency or pardon, will die in jail. But I didn't realize this. We were just talking about it. And his dad, I knew his dad had represented himself in court and the mom didn't. That was one of the reasons they had such different sentences. But I kind of, do you know a lot about the Weather Underground? Because I didn't ask you about this in advance, but I forgot the Black Liberation Army. That was the organization that they were supporting or acting as an allyship with.
Yeah, the Weather Underground really had an allyship kind of model. That's really true of them. They had a kind of very romantic and kind of reductive understanding of third world movements and black movements. They thought that the American working class had been bought into the system, and so that revolution would come from outside. But this meant that they, as I said, they had a kind of caricatured view of black movements and third world movements. And there was an excellent critique of this by Noel Ignatieff, who recently died. I wrote a little tribute to him in Slate. Oh. He wrote a critique of the Weather Underground, which is called "Without a Science of Navigation, We Cannot Sail in Stormy Seas." That's the title.
Wow. It's good.
Here, let me see.
I'm going to link to.
So that's something that is worth reading today for people who are interested in that history, which is a critique of how, the Weather Underground had this romantic and caricatured view of black movements and did not appreciate the extent to which white privilege, Ignatieff had formulated the concept of white privilege, which was at the time called white skin privilege, along with Theodore Allen.
When was this?
In the 60s, in a text called White Blind Spot, which you can find online. And so White Blind Spot set out the theory of white skin privilege. The idea of white skin privilege was that white people, white workers, are extended certain privileges and advantages so that they can be incorporated into the club of whiteness, even though they may have come from various immigrant populations that were discriminated against in various ways, Irish, Italians, and so on. They're invited to join the club of whiteness by taking advantages and participating in the greater oppression of black people, but that this prevents them from actually forming a class movement that can overcome their exploitation. So white skin privilege is actually harmful to white workers. That's why it's in the interest of white workers to fight against white supremacy.
Right.
And that's an argument that is very distant from the kinds of arguments you get now, which, you know, say that white privilege is the reason why white people have to like confess their guilt. They, you know, they have to read White Fragility, et cetera, et cetera. But this argument was white people have to participate in the struggle against white supremacy in order to form a common, unified movement against capitalism.
Asad, is there anything you would like me to confess to?
No, that's not my job.
All right. That's really what I was inviting you on to do. Like
you wanted me to be your white fragility therapist?
My coach. Like Jesse on did you ever watch Saved by the Bell?
Did I ever watch what?
Saved by the Bell?
No.
Oh, it's really good. And Jesse, it's about a high school. And it's a sitcom from the 90s. And Jesse, they have like an ancestry day, and we learned that one of the characters, who's the one black character on the show, her parents were her great parents were involved in the Underground Railroad. And then Jessie Spano, played by Elizabeth Berkley, who's from Showgirls.
Showgirls, great movie, yeah.
She went up there and said that she was like, my family, they were involved in like travel and trade, and they shipped things and they traded things. And they're like, what are you talking about, Jesse? And she was like, they were slave owners, okay? And then she apologizes to Lisa and keeps offering to like mow her lawn and like drive her places.
So I just sent to you, I think, in the chat.
Yeah.
This is another article by Noel Ignatieff. He was like a really relevant figure to read right now instead of reading White Fragility. And the article is called Abolitionism and the White Studies Racket. And this is something really relevant to read. I'm just going to read one passage from it.
And just I will put all the links in the YouTube show notes. Okay.
Yeah. So he says, the diversity industry does not depend on small groups of well-intentioned people meeting in church basements, but on lucrative contracts with corporations to conduct seminars for executives on how to manage their labor force. Some of the people in the diversity industry remind me of doctors who secretly love the disease they are supposed to be fighting. It is fortunate that in the 19th century they had abolitionists instead of diversity consultants. If not, slavery would still exist, and representatives of slaves and slaveholders would be meeting together to promote mutual understanding and good feeling. So that's a really classic article that people should read.
It's the white
abolitionism and the white studies.
I got it. Exactly. I know. Okay, I got it. So now you guys can see it. I also posted it, and I will post them more of them later. Should I try to get Robin DeAngelis on the show?
Yeah.
Would you debate her?
Yeah.
Okay, great. But first, you have to have a list of demands for her.
I'm not going to make demands on her, you know.
You should. Okay.
She can present her argument, and then we can discuss it.
All right. I think you should quote her to herself, though. Quote her to her anyway. Okay. Let's see. Here's another question. This I don't know. Let's see. What do you think of Western left-washing / negative view of the global South socialist nations?
I think that there's nothing really constructive for leftists in the advanced capitalist world to criticize the socialist experiments in the rest of the world that are threatened by U.S. imperialism. Our responsibility is to criticize U.S. imperialism. And we should certainly maintain an idea of socialism which is critical of state repression and so on. I think it's important to make that distinction. It's important not to just assume that anyone who is against US imperialism represents socialism or represents an emancipated society. But at the same time, our criticisms are purely symbolic, because our role is to undermine US imperialism from where we are. That's what we can actually do, and that's what we should do, you know. And for the whole century, the whole preceding century, nobody has known how it is possible to build socialism in the context of a capitalist world market. You have an entire capitalist globe. And so how is it that you're going to build a socialist society within it? That's not simple.
Mm.
And you can rely on all kinds of counterfactuals, like that, if there had been a global revolution, then it would have, allowed Russia to go further or whatever. But that's not based in the concrete reality of the situation. And so I think we also have to have a kind of very objective attitude in saying that it has never been clear how to engage in socialist construction, and we have to learn from the mistakes, but also the achievements that have been made in the post-revolutionary societies.
Here's interesting feedback. A company I worked for asked me to run the diversity session because I was the only Black and gay man, LMAO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that experience.
And then what do you say? I was thinking here's another question. Is the U.S. hegemonic status really in decline?
I don't think so. I mean, I think, this is like a question it's very hard to make predictions about what's coming in the future. And it's certainly true that China is developing on a fairly politically independent path that is not totally subordinate to U.S. hegemony, but nevertheless, I don't think that U.S. hegemony is just going to fall apart. I think it's
adaptive.
It's got some lasting power. Yeah.
Thoughts on on a related note? Thoughts on Biden versus Trump on foreign policy?
I don't know. Excuse me. Trump hasn't started any wars, has he?
No, he dabbled in. No, I mean he dabbled in Syria.
Yeah.
He did drop some. I'm reminded of the beauty of the missiles. That's Ryan Williams was moved by that and quoted Leonard Cohen, totally not understanding his lyrics.
Okay.
But no, I mean, people don't like to talk about this, and especially the recent embrace of John Bolton into the resistance by the resistance is a classic example of how Trump, I mean, depending on how you see COVID, but he has a lower body count than Bush. And he did, it's true, he did try to start a war with Iran, as Kyle Jones said. And of course, as Rania Khalek has said on the show, everyone hates Donald Trump, and libs hate Donald Trump except for when he's starting or trying to start wars, at which point he becomes presidential.
Right.
Yeah. It's very hard, I think, for people for libs to see how Donald Trump is in many ways an aberration, but also continuation. And also is in some ways not because he's a moral person, but like I kind of can't believe we have to have this discussion. But he will have better positions sometimes on things for various reasons.
It's the way that George W. Bush had like a better position on immigration than Obama did.
Right. Yeah. It's so reactionary, quite literally, right? When your politics are shaped by the opposite of whatever Trump is doing or saying, because inevitably people like Bush wasn't like, an internationalist. His policies on immigration were much more related to other considerations. But yeah, you are going to wind up on the wrong side of history a lot if that's your reason. I mean, or TPP, which Donald Trump opposed. It's still bad. What else? We should do a thing where I ask you a bunch of the cliches that people like to put out in response to communism. Like it works it works well on paper.
Yeah.
But it's never worked in real life.
That's a totally incoherent statement. I mean, what does it mean for something to work in theory and not in practice? If it doesn't work in practice, it's not a good theory. So I mean, that's just an incoherent. I mean, logically, it's an incoherent statement. So, first we can ask the question: does capitalism work in practice? Well, in practice, capitalism results in extreme poverty and economic inequality. It's shown itself to accelerate and be incapable of preventing ecological disaster. It has cultivated a situation of extreme geopolitical violence and war. That's not working very well in practice.
Well, unless, again, the irony is unless you are accepting that that's part of the theory of capitalism, which you probably would accept, right? But the people defending it and attacking communism wouldn't.
I mean, the people defending it, like the classical idea of capitalism, of markets, was that they would result in greater wealth.
Right.
It would result in greater prosperity. And it did, actually, to some extent. It's true that over the history of capitalism, people's living standards rose. We had the possibility of the productivity of labor increasing at rates that were unprecedented before in human history. But then the contradiction is that the private property relations of capitalism prevented any of these achievements from actually translating into improvements in people's lives. We now have the possibility of feeding everybody in the world.
Right. Yeah.
And we don't. Instead, we have people destroying food because of the anarchy of the market. And we have the possibility of a society in which people don't have to work very much because we have the technological capacity to reduce the necessary labor of the society to a very low level. And yet, what actually happens? What actually happens is that everybody's supposed to go to work, even if what they're doing is not useful, because they need to go to work to survive. And then some people who have been rendered superfluous by the by the automation of the labor process and so on, they starve. Instead of the fact that because we don't have to do so much work, the wealth that's generated by the society can be extended to everybody. Instead, the fact that some people don't have to work becomes their death sentence.
Mm.
I mean, it's a level of irrationality in social organization that's just beyond. I mean, it's almost incomprehensible. But it is comprehensible because that's what capitalism is.
Right. It is rational. It's just right. It's just rational for.
It's rational insofar as you accept the idea that society should be organized towards the goal of the accumulation of profit
Right.
by a minority of the owners. And from the perspective of leading a dignified life, from the perspective of a society which is able to operate towards the benefit of the people who live in it, it's totally irrational.
Right. By the way, Haza says socialism works in theory, but in practice you get overthrown by the CIA. Pretty well said.
Sometimes.
Yeah. We should do a book club.
Okay.
What should we read? You can assign the reading.
I already suggested some.
All right, so which one?
I mean, depends what you want to. I mean, what do you want to talk about?
I don't know. What should I'll let listeners and viewers decide. Should we put in? Well, we could read one of your articles.
Well, decide what topics you want to read about.
What I don't know. What do people want to read about? What would you enjoy leading us in discussion about, Asad?
There's so many possibilities. So I mean, people should pipe in and say what they're interested in.
Kyle Jones says Michelle Obama's book.
No.
Okay, Assad has exercised his veto power. This essay, I like this collection. What about this essay that you? And then I want to ask you about your essay. We'll have to do this another time because you had a great piece about Martin Luther King. I don't know. Here's what I would like to read. I want to go through like the classic texts. So, like Karl Marx.
Yeah.
Gramsci.
Okay.
Do we have to read some Hegel to get? No. Okay. You'll give us the cliff notes. Karl Marx, Lenin, Gramsci. Who else do we have to read? I kind of like some fascist texts, futurist texts. Those are interesting. We got to study them.
I think a great text to read right now is Lenin's State and Revolution.
All right. And that's short, right? I believe?
Yes.
All right. So why don't we do that?
Okay.
Is it available? It's at Marxist.org.
Of course.
All right. Let's see. I've never seen. Oh, wait. You were professing in this post-COVID world. So you know about what it's like to teach over Zoom, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And how is it?
It sucks.
That's not the response I was hoping for.
No, Zoom. Teaching on Zoom is not very good.
Okay, what about book clubbing on Zoom? Have you ever been part of a book club?
Yeah, I have reading groups that I do. I mean, classes are different because, you have structural requirements. You're supposed to assess people and things like that. But I mean, if people are independently motivated to study a text,
right.
And
then we can ask you questions.
Okay.
That's good, right?
Sure.
All right, cool. So this is going to be, we're going to have a Katie Halper show reading group. It's really the Asad Haider reading group. Sponsored by the Katie Halper show. And we're accepting any sponsorships from any alcohol companies. Yeah, and then you can do a recipe also. All right, great.
Possible.
Okay, so that's what we're starting, guys, for next week. Did I put the link in? And I'll put all of these things. It takes a village. That would be good too, yeah. Did I put this link in? There it is. All right, great. Any final thoughts, Asad? Oops.
No, that's good. I mean, yeah.
Maybe a lot of people are suggesting Christian Parenti.
Okay. Look, it depends.
Michael Parenti. Sorry about that. Yeah. What were you saying?
It depends on what people want to read. I mean, okay, yeah. I don't agree with all of these points here, but okay.
What
Some of them I think are fine, but okay. I mean, you want to read Marx? I mean, Marx is really complicated to read because of the publication history of his texts. You know, Marx goes through a very complicated evolution in his theoretical framework. And some of the most accessible texts represent they represent a position he took at one time, which he moved on from.
Oh, well, we got to trace
The
that.
Communist Manifesto, for example, is really one of the most accessible texts. It has a lot of great insights. It's really great to read, but at the same time, he changed many of his views from because it's in 1848, you know, and Capital is 1867. So there is a long period of research and response to changing historical conditions that happens in between.
Right.
And so some of these texts are, you know, he didn't intend them for publication. They're notes that he wrote for himself, and they're very complicated to interpret. So it can be a challenge to read Marx. You have to kind of go over a very wide range of texts and kind of follow how he's changing his views and what makes his theoretical framework different from what came before him. The interesting thing about, like, the reason I suggest Lenin's State and Revolution is that on this one topic, the theory of the state, Lenin pulled out all of the relevant quotations in Marx from all of these different texts.
Very good. All right.
And so that's useful. But, you know, I mean, there are many other, you know.
No, I like that. It's shorter. It's a bit of a, you know, it's like cheating a bit. Then people can decide. Then we can vote democratically about what we want to do next. Maybe we should read one of your essays too. Would that go hand in hand?
So I've written this stuff for Salon, which is, you know, more interventions of the current political situation. One of the first ones was about Marx's economic theory, which I tried to give a little bit of a primer. But also my most recent text for Viewpoint set out some of my current theoretical perspectives. So there's one called On Depoliticization. There's one called What is Political Power?
Right.
And then there's one about Gramsci called Pessimism of the Will. It's a bit, but anyway, I mean, those are things that people can read if they want to look at what material I've been working with. Right.
People will probably appreciate asking you questions of your own stuff. So you think we should start with on depoliticization? Should we start with the more recent? Like, should we start with the No Justice, No Peace? Maybe. I know that doesn't go as much with the Marxism, right?
Yeah, that doesn't lay out as much Marxism. And then the Gramsci piece is a little technical, so I would say On Depoliticization and What is Political Power are the kind of more introductory texts of mine.
Okay, great. So we'll
read. Then there's also another one a little earlier called Socialists Think.
Yeah.
Which is a possibility.
Okay, so should we start with that one?
That's a really short one. I don't know. You look.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You look at these texts and you decide what you want to.
All right. Well, for now, I'm definitely assigning the. We're definitely going to assign that Lenin piece, okay. And then I will. If I'm going to say we're going to read this one too, Socialist Thing. Okay, so that's the assignment for next week.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Asad. What are you working on next?
What's that?
What are you working on next?
That's a good question.
Why don't you workshop it next week with us?
All right.
So get feedback. All right.
All right.
Awesome. Okay. I used to teach history, by the way. People saying, "Okay, Professor Halper." Asad isn't high. I don't know why this person keeps saying this.
No, I don't get high. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't like marijuana.
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much for visiting, for watching, for super chatting. And of course, you can support the Katie Halper Show at patreon.com/the Katie Halper, because we still do live in the capitalist world system. So I got to keep pushing that out there. Assad is our king. Yeah, that's good. All right. Okay. So I will see everyone. I'm doing this show now. Is Sunday night good for you for the reading group, Assad? Or do we want to? I'm basically.
Possibly. We gotta.
Maybe early, do we want a daytime reading group? I mean, not reading group, book club. Maybe we want a daytime book club.
Check in with me a couple days before.
All right, and then I will post it on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. But for the Katie Halper Show right now, the idea is Wednesday nights and Sunday nights. All right. Bye, everyone.
Good night.